Welcome to another adventure on Mount Sophia. Today I have the pleasure of climbing with David Taylor. David is a great friend to me and has been greatly helpful in my journey thus far. In this conversation, we explore parts of our personal histories, especially in personal transformations and becoming climbers on this mountain of wisdom. Thank you, and as always, if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. So yeah, I guess let's start with talking a little bit about your journey, and then maybe I'll share a little bit about how we got connected on my end.
Yeah. Well, you know what, honestly, like, let's start with that. Cause and then I'll jump in. Like, let's talk about your connection, how you got started, and then I'll just jump in and throw it out there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So from the perspective that you and I got connected, my journey really started 3 years ago or so, when I grew up with the frame of fundamentalist Christian, basically. And so my framing for most things is biblical. And then about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, I engaged Jordan Peterson and his content. And that kind of started to break some things open in terms of his biblical perspectives were really enlightening for me in terms of there's more ways to come around looking at these stories and ideas than the hegemony of this is the way.
Yeah.
So that was one point, and then it was over a year later that I started meditating, kind of by a strange route that happened, but I just kind of fell into it to deal with anxiety in graduate school. And then it was interesting before that. So you and your brother had put together my pilgrimage, and about 6 years ago, I was dealing with pornography, which I dealt with kind of on and off. And this was when you were first like with the XXX church and everything like that.
Yeah.
And so I had purchased some kind of package. It was like $500 or something, which for me was like a lot of money at the time.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember that whole thing. Yeah. The package.
Yeah.
Right. It was the book. It was the book and the workbook and all the access to all the videos and the teachings and everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got it. And I read the book and I just like couldn't engage, I saw some of it, but I just couldn't, it didn't connect for me really. And I just kind of, okay, I can't do with this. And then
for your users,
for
your listeners, that's the book called Feels Like Redemption, The Pilgrimage to Health and Healing. And then there's a workbook that comes along with it. And that's what Ken is referring to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that had been kind of on the back burner for me since then.
Yeah.
Like I had the context of having read the book, and some of your stories. And then after I started meditating, I'm not sure how I think I ran across your podcast. Yeah. And
the My Pilgrimage podcast.
My Pilgrimage podcast, indeed. And started listening to that again. And that was really helpful.
Yeah.
That was helpful to kind of start going into kind of somatic release of trauma and things like that, which was huge for me. I mean, the first times I had been meditating and doing guided imagery and those kinds of things. And then I started trying to do this processing thing, which I was kind of like, okay, this is weird. I'm going to try it. And like the first time I went and did the processing, I like had some wild encounters.
Yeah. But you can, especially at first. Right. And so there you go. Well done. Yeah. Cheers, man. Well, you having a little, it looks like a Scottish ale that you're having there.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Well, it's actually the Alaskan Amber.
Oh, well done.
So, well done. Yeah.
I'm having an old fashioned here, little Maker's Mark bourbon, and
perfect.
Alaskan Amber is great. I'll tell you that story later. Alaskan Amber is great. Out of Juneau. Yeah, fantastic. That, it's interesting because you kind of moved into these space where you're having these conversations on consciousness now, which is different than kind of like trauma space, right?
Yeah.
I did the same thing. It's like after a while, it's a couple of years and it just became a more interesting conversation than talking about trauma.
Totally.
And it wasn't because trauma is not important. That's what the interesting thing about the whole thing is, that we all kind of sit and go, you have to go there first, right? Just like you had to go from your religious space, you had to hear a Christian who had a kind of slightly more elevated or open take on the Bible, take on Jesus's message. It's like there's just these little stepping stones.
Yeah.
Right. That you have to have. It's very few people can go from, I've been in religion my whole life, I'm a porn addict, to also just,
yeah,
I'm Eckhart Tolle or I'm floating around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, that just doesn't happen to people. Most people, it's that gradual, you find your little stepping stone. And for you, it's interesting because you go, oh, the Jordan Peterson's teachings, like that little, I had the same thing. And these little gradual steps, to a big book for me, one of the biggest, the first book, it was a book called Blue Like Jazz.
Okay.
You ever heard of this book?
I don't think so.
Okay. So go back, we're going mid 2000s. Oh, I want to say it probably came out probably 04 or 05. I can't remember exactly when it came out. It was written by a guy named Donald Miller.
Okay.
And it became a huge bestseller.
Okay.
New York Times bestseller. And it was just that. It was this kind of young, kind of talented writer with these observations on this kind of more open understanding of Christianity, this more kind of more full of grace, more full of love and understanding and stuff. And it kind of jived with this new space that I was kind of moving into. Right. Yeah. And this is before I ended up at like White Raven Center, was doing, processing and meditation and stuff like that. It was just that slight opening up. And what it did was, for me, it started chopping away at the fundamentalist programming that I had grown up with, that I've been taught, and started really just kind of digging into those questions. Just going, man, I have these deeper questions. And it turns out I'd always had those questions. Right. Yeah. But I didn't have permission to ask the questions. You have to have this psychological permission. Someone has to give you permission, or something has to give you permission to start asking those questions. Is it okay? Is it okay? Come out of the corner, out of the shadow, and go, this is cool, right? I can ask, the whole thing about God kind of sending the vast majority of humans to burn in hell forever, and we still call them loving. Like, how do we, reconcile those? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Concepts like that. Those are all the questions that you asked that when you were a kid, you just didn't have permission to ask. So you did not go there,
Yeah.
That book was the first book that for me, and that opened it up. And it's interesting. You're talking about Jordan Peterson's teaching, going, yeah, it's kind of funny. You can start to look back and go, oh, these are stepping stones. This is why when I meet a fundamentalist Christian who's just starting to ask those questions, I never go, well, you need to start reading Deepak Chopra or something.
Yeah. Because then it's just now we'll just shut down.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't help. It really doesn't help them. And the funny thing is right now is that it also has to do more with the timing of things. Because if I was to say, oh, you should read Blue Like Jazz, well, Blue Like Jazz is 17 years old now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Has to be relevant too.
It has to be relevant. And that means it has to be somebody in the space now who's writing and asking those questions and writing those things right now. If I said, hey, you should listen to, read some Rob Bell.
Yeah.
Well, the first Rob Bell book blew my mind, and it was Velvet Elvis, but he was still a pastor at the time, right? He was a Christian pastor, and so, and for me, I was lucky to have Rob and Donald, have Rob along the way. It's like almost like he was just like this step ahead of me and ahead of Seth, to my brother, just kind of leading, just kind of putting out these little breadcrumbs to follow in that way, which was a real blessing,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, right? Because there's this whole movement of where I guess the way I would talk about it is taking this web of stuff that has just kind of become what you think you are.
Yeah.
And because it's such a dense web of answers that you can't question, it's like you have to peel it apart. There has to be kind of a space there to start with, and then it has to be appropriate for that space.
Yeah.
But it's
And that space
interesting.
has to be created. Somebody, you have to create it. Someone has to create it. Yeah. It's almost, you have to create it and fill it and create it and fill it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And oftentimes it's some kind of suffering and trauma that does that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, I would say almost always suffering, I mean, that's a Buddhist way of understanding things, that, all consciousness is come to through suffering. Right?
Yeah.
That's their belief. I don't think that's completely true, because I've seen people come through consciousness through euphoric events. Rob Bell talks about in Velvet Elvis, he talks about the first time that he really felt the Holy Spirit, like really powerfully. He was at a U2 concert, right? And you can go to music and bring you to that space. And awesome book called Stealing Fire. Have you ever read that book? Highly recommend that book. And it talks about kind of these kind of hyper realistic, hyper euphoric states that humans can go to, and it has all these different kind of studies and things on how people get through that, through chemicals, through exercise, through meditation, through all these different ways and stuff, and talks a lot about those kinds of things. That's a fantastic read. You'd love it. It's actually very timely, I think, for you. But suffering is the way that we come to those existential questions that lead us there naturally. You know what I mean? Especially in the religious space, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially in that.
So as we're talking about this kind of this web and this movement out, how would you characterize the space from which one is moving when you're in whatever setting you're in, whether it's a religious thing, whether it's any kind of dogmatic, this is who I am, this is what I believe, that we're talking about a path out, where are we going?
Yeah. Oh man. One of the things that's interesting is that I've learned, gosh, it's funny. I've been having conversations about this stuff with different people all day over text and different stuff like that. Throughout my work day was shot today because I just kept getting texts. And my oldest son kept calling me. He called me and he was asking questions about how he's 23 and he's starting to really get this real vivid glimpse of the adult world. He's on his own. He lives in Virginia. He's moving to Washington State on Friday. Actually, he's moving Friday.
Oh, nice.
And driving across the country and all that. Nice. And he's starting to realize that his upbringing and the space that we've created in our family, where questions are great, people can doubt, you can have it, and there's just love no matter what. There's acceptance no matter what. He's starting to realize that, wow, that's created this thing for me in which I kind of, I can figure things out easier. And he goes, I feel, and he said it really funny. He said, I feel like I'm smarter than people. And I was like, okay. And he's like, there's a lot of idiots. He goes, and I was like, okay, yeah. And he's like, well, what do you think about it? I mean, are we better than those people? And this is an honest question, like where he's feeling superior intellectually, he's feeling superior even kind of from a consciousness, spiritual standpoint.
Sure.
Right? As you know, when you expand, your ego comes right along with you.
It's a real danger. This is a real danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I said to him, but they're all living out their purpose, their karma, their mission, just like you are, right? I said, not everybody's going to ask these questions. I said, we can never judge anybody because we all are where we are. And that's the only place we can be. You know what I mean? That's the only way. And it's just so easy to go, you're supposed to be where I am, or you should be asking deeper questions and that kind of thing. And that goes back to trauma. That trauma, it turns out, does hold people in spaces, it's our willingness to confront that at first, to really go there and go, I'm going to deal with that. And the question becomes, am I going to let it, I see it now. I'm confronting it. I see that, my dad beat the crap out of me when I was a kid, or, my mom was an alcoholic. I see where I was abused, or I see these things. How am I going to deal with that? Processing, therapy, shamans, mushrooms, whatever it is you're going to do. Or you go all Ram Dass on it and go, it's all an illusion. Right? I'm not, there's so many different paths to take in that direction. And the ultimate direction in terms of where we're going with it, right, is we're all going to God. That's my answer for it.
Nice.
We're all going to God. You know what I mean? And if you're a Christian, per se, okay, let's say you're a Christian and you're an actually spiritually engaged Christian, which most Christians aren't. And if you're a Christian listening to this, you have to ask yourself, am I an spiritually engaged Christian, or am I just a Christian the way that, any religion person goes, yeah, I'm a Christian. I go to church on Sundays. Yeah, but you're still out there pursuing money and careers and, good tickets at the ballpark and, a better bottle of wine.
Is it just the structure that allows your life to run, or
exactly? Hold your belief system, makes you feel secure, makes you feel safe, so that you can, like I said, you can go, to the vacation home on the weekend. That's different, right?
Yeah, or it can be the vehicle which orients you upward.
Exactly. And so that's what we're talking about. If it is your vehicle that orients you upward and you really see it that way, then you are going to God through that pathway. And that pathway leads to a very specific God with a very specific theological bend, right? And there's a ceiling to it. We hit that ceiling when you have a God that has lots of structure to it, and religions all have structured gods, whether it's Allah, whether it's Yahweh, whether it's Jesus, whether there's a defined thing that those religions have created around it. If I'm a Catholic, I have a very set structure on kind of how that goes in, and there's a ceiling, and that ceiling might be the Pope, but it's a ceiling. Mm-hmm. So I'm going on that way. Eventually I will hit the ceiling. And then the job inside that space is just to stay there, to stay in that space. Now, let's say I hit the ceiling. I'm a Catholic and I hit that ceiling, which I go to mass every Sunday. I donate to the church. I'm upstanding in my community. I have a beautiful family. I rarely go to confession, but I do go to confession because I'm humble enough to do that. You know what I mean? I shook hands with the Pope last time I was on vacation. All that stuff happens. I've hit that ceiling, and now I've got to maintain that because I'm 48 years old. Yeah. And I got probably 30 years left on the planet. I got to maintain it. So how do I fill that space? Well, I fill that space by keeping that going, but also vacations, better bottle of wine, all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So from a consciousness standpoint, the idea would be to go, what's the pathway to God that has the highest ceiling?
Yeah.
Right.
Or no ceiling, ideally. Right?
Or no ceiling at all.
Yeah.
Right. And we can point at certain teachers and go, that person didn't have a ceiling. Mm-hmm. I think Ram Dass was one of our modern, one of those guys. His teachings, if you look at Ram Dass's teachings, he definitely, there was no ceiling. And that documentary, Becoming Nothing, is an awesome documentary for people to watch if you want to understand kind of where his journey was.
Yeah.
I think Jesus was the same way. If you start reading Jesus's teachings as a spiritual teacher instead of just as a part of your kind of concrete theology, and you start looking at his teachings, you actually read the teachings. Yeah. And you go, okay, these teachings were meant to be read, listened to, consumed, and then applied. Like when he's saying, hey, you'll do greater things than I do. And he's like freaking walking on water. And right? Pathway to God.
How do you create a space within yourself where you can engage in such a way that you're not placing a structure already onto the teachings of the thing, right? Because I feel like this was a block for me for a long time. That sense of like, I couldn't read, and the Bible's a perfect example of this, right? Like I couldn't read the Bible and not already know what it was saying, right? But now it's like, now I go and I read the Bible and it's like, oh man,
very different. Yeah.
I
have the same experience. Yeah, I read the Bible all the time. I'll pull out things and I'll go, what? I've read that a million times. I did not know it meant that, but if you look at it, Jesus, and you go, okay, he's saying, he's telling us, he tells his followers, you will do greater things than I do. Not only that, he also said, oh, well, I'm my Father in one. You and I are one. You are to be one. We are all to be united in the same way that I'm united to God. You're to be united to me and to God. And we're all in this kind of, and you start teaching that and looking at that going, oh my gosh, he wanted us to apply it.
Yeah.
To take that and go. And of course you can't in that way, right? You can't go because he's not here. If he was sitting next to you and you could go, hey, explain to me exactly what you meant by that. And he was like, oh, well, you know what? Okay, let's do some acid and then we're gonna, then I'll show you or whatever.
You'll just know.
Right, exactly. or he'd be like, hey, we're gonna meditate and we're gonna do this for, or example in the Bible. You can just go sell every single thing you have and follow me.
Yeah.
Right. That's the same thing. It's the same freaking thing. He's looking at the rich guy and he's going, okay, you really want to know? Okay, great. Go sell everything you have. He's trying to blow that guy's complete paradigm and structure for the entire world. I wish Jesus was standing at every church on a Sunday morning and he said that same thing to every one of those church members. Go to the mega church in Joel Osteen and go sell everything, man. Just come with me. We're going to walk into downtown Dallas and just sit with the poor every day.
It's interesting when you realize that Jesus's harshest rebukes were for those who were wealthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the main place where Jesus consigns, it actually speaks of an individual as being in hell, is the rich man and Lazarus.
Yeah.
And it's a contrast of the life of the wealthy and the poor.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, actually, Rob Bell wrote a book years ago called Love Wins. And New York Times bestseller, extremely controversial, got him on the cover of Time magazine and everything like that. And it was like, I think it's still his biggest seller ever. And it was the book that when he wrote it, it was the book that kind of just rocked the whole evangelical world and pushed him out of, he was very quickly done in his evangelical space, and he moved out to California from Michigan and all that. The book, if you ever read it, was not that big a deal. It's funny, people were freaking out because all they were getting were the headlines, but if you read it, it was simply a Bible study. That's all it was. He just decided to go into the Bible and find every instance in the New Testament, in which heaven, or in the Gospels, in which heaven was mentioned, in which hell was mentioned, and go into the linguistics, into the hermeneutics, the whole, do the whole kind of thing that religion scholars do.
Yeah.
Extrapolate the whole thing with the ancient languages, all that stuff, find the real meanings of it, and try and kind of talk about it and explain it. And he did. And what he essentially was able to kind of come out with was, he wasn't talking about this eternal place you go after you die and we burn in a lake forever with a dude with a pitchfork in it. And he wasn't also talking about a golden mansion in the sky. Those weren't what he was referring to at all. And it's funny, if you go to Luke 13, like he says it bluntly, where he goes, "Oh, by the way, the kingdom of heaven is not a place you go to; it's inside you." Right? He says it bluntly, but we all kind of,
Yeah.
We just ignore that part.
Go.
Go.
Well, I was going to reorient a little bit, because I think we've done a decent job there.
We did good. Well done. Well, cheers.
Yeah, indeed.
Well done. Yeah.
Because what I'd like to explore a little bit more is the actual path by which you get out.
Get out. Okay. I got a guy named Tim. He's a new guy in the My Pilgrimage group, and Timothy is, and he's an older gentleman. And stumbled through the internet rabbit hole, found podcast, ended up listening to a bunch of podcasts, just got the books, just started reading it.
Nice.
Mine just, wow,
Yeah.
Well, how did he get out? Well, he lost his wife. She OD'd.
Oh gosh.
Last year.
Oh gosh.
He's gone through drugs and addiction and stuff his whole life. Incredible, immense amounts of suffering.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of us have gone through a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
He came to it because he got to that one point where it's like you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Right. You get to a point where you go, oh, you know what? I'm so unhappy. I've got nothing to lose. I'm just gonna search. I'm just gonna keep searching. I'm gonna find. And if you seek, you will find. If your heart is going, I've got to find the real thing. I've got to find it. All of a sudden it's there. It finds you because you're genuinely looking for the thing. You're not looking for the thing that your ego is going to be able to hold up and go, hey, look at me. I've met plenty of those guys, man. I remember being on a retreat, doing this men's retreat thing that I was leading, and you get this whole group of 15 guys in front of you and stuff like that, and you go down the line, and it's like you got every kind of, you'd have a few of them are real seekers, and then you'd have a few of them and a few of them are there just to try and co-opt everything you're saying so they can put it on their Instagram. And
it's like that idea of, do you want the thing, or do you want to want the thing, or do you want to look like you want the thing?
Yeah. For me, my path was, I've got nothing to lose. It's all falling apart. Like I hit my rock bottom, my dark night of the soul. I hit that point, and I realized, what good is to gain the whole world and lose your whole soul, And
Mm.
that has served me really well as over the last decade, as I've found peace and joy and love and all the goodness, and also all the other benefits that come along with that, and also in prosperity and all these other things have come along.
Yeah.
But I never forgot. I've got this dark night of the soul. I get to look back and realize, oh, none of it matters. None of it really matters. None of it's, you know what I mean? It's all kind of an illusion, and and I think that.
So was it the point of realizing? So one of the things you said there is you're at a point where there's nothing left to lose.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also this aspect of the meaninglessness of it.
You have to break, right? There has to be a brokenness to it. And you, I mean, what was your story? Because my brokenness was like, I'm trying to kill myself kind of stuff, and suicidal, and addiction and all that. What was your like, how did you kind of shift, and did you break?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have that much of a stark kind of experience. For me, there was the pornography issue that was there, and I was very frustrated that it never went away.
Yeah.
But I was also like, I was the kind of guy who would kind of go back and forth. Like I'd be fine for a while and then I go back.
Yeah.
I'd be fine for a while and go back. And I just got so frustrated with the fact, because I thought, oh, I'll get married and it'll go away. Right.
Yeah.
And then it did for a while, and then it came back, and then it goes away and it comes back. And so that there was that in the background.
Yeah.
But, I started when I was, I think 15, I memorized the book of Proverbs for a thing at school. And
wow, well done.
I remember, oh, well, thank you. Yes. But, but I'm,
your mom must have been so happy.
Yeah, they were excited. But I'm tremendously grateful for it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I remember the guy who was my kind of mentor teacher at the time telling me was that wisdom is like a cross, and that there's wisdom up and down, which is wisdom in respect to God, and then there's wisdom laterally,
interesting,
towards the world around you.
Yeah, I dig that.
And he said, Solomon had both at the beginning, and then slowly lost the vertical piece.
Yeah.
And I remember since that time, I would say this prayer occasionally, that just God give me wisdom, but give me the vertical kind.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of just always had this underlying drive to try to find the real, is probably how I would say.
Yeah.
And so at some point, I mean, once I decided to, meditation started to open me up.
Yeah.
And then once I started processing and had a few like pretty crazy mystical experiences, then that was kind of like, okay, now we're going somewhere.
Yeah.
And then eventually I started to I kind of realized I didn't need to process anymore.
Yeah.
I just would go into that space.
So that's very similar to me. I look back now, even in my childhood, and go, oh, I was always seeking. I can remember that. I was always kind of looking. I was always looking for the real deal. I always kind of saw. I even look at. Even when I was very young, I have these memories of going, yeah, none of this seems real. None of this makes really any sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Everyone is play acting.
Yeah, everyone's play acting.
Yeah, like here and there, you run across somebody where you're like, oh wait, there's something real going on here.
Right.
But a lot of times you're just kind of like, okay, this is.
Yeah. And then when you see the real thing, you go, oh, it's very attractive, right? It's when I met my wife, I was like that. I was like, whoa, she's the real deal. And it wasn't, I'm serious. Like I fell madly in love with her, and she's beautiful, but it wasn't that. It wasn't, I met her, she was wearing a baggy t-shirt and some basketball shorts, and I fell madly in love. And I was like, I just remember just going, this person is real. And she is the same way. She's always kind of been like, yeah, it's all, don't take any of this too serious, none of it's really matters all that much. For me, it was always peace. And for her, it was always love. I just wanted peace. My whole thing was, I want the real thing. Yeah. The peace that passes understanding, that one where you just go, I am so freaking happy and I have no explanation for it. I wanted to feel that, experience that, And so I just kept looking until I found it, and then that took me down and then took me up.
Yeah.
God, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And speaking, I have a similar experience with my wife, and I like to use the word reverence for that.
Yeah.
But that there's that sense of, I think the turning point for me though was when I went to Florida for a month for a rotation in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a month living as it was an inpatient psychiatric facility in like an old hotel
In
and
Florida.
in Florida and West Palm Beach,
Oh
Florida.
gosh, this is getting better and better.
Yeah, and I stayed in that. Part of the reason I did this rotation was because I could stay for free if I stayed on site, and that meant just living on the ward.
Oh wow.
So I did that for a month, and I didn't have a car. Fortunately,
Wow.
I was able to make a couple of friends with the other students there, and that was nice. But like, I never spend time away from my wife really,
Sure.
and I was just alone.
Uh,
And that was the darkest time of my life probably.
yeah.
Because you wouldn't get sleep because people are screaming, and
Yeah.
I mean it's just like it's an inpatient mental institution in the modern world where we don't have any idea what to do with mental disorders. So it was rough. So
It's interesting you said that. My dad actually did a turn when he lost his job at Boeing when we were kids. He got laid off in the 80s, like everybody else. And he took a turn because he was an EMT from Vietnam and everything like that. He took a turn working at a psychiatric hospital in downtown Seattle. And for whatever reason, one night my brother and I went. He was working the graveyard shift, and we went and stayed the night there.
Oh,
when we were kids.
Wow.
We slept in the little back office behind the front, the desk.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my dad was thinking, but like we didn't sleep a wink, man. I swear to God. And the next morning, my dad was kind of the big guy, and he had to do the rounds. Like they would do med call in the morning, and then he would have to do the rounds if people weren't getting out of bed. He would have to get people out of bed and stuff like that. He took us with him. He took us with him on a med call, and he's like, yeah. So like we're walking into these rooms, like, and I swear to God, I was probably 8 or 9, and I'm like going, med call on these poor patients. And I look back and I go, what was he thinking, But at the same time, I'll never forget. I remember there was one guy that was just like, effing get out of my effing room, just screaming at us and stuff. My dad was just saying calmly. And but I actually, so I kind of know what you're talking about. But you got a month of that.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
Wow,
well, and I had a decent bit of exposure because I'd worked in the emergency department for several years before that. So like I had my fair share of engagement with people in really dire circumstances. But yeah, I mean, it was a different thing to be in it. It's like one thing to do a day or two, but like, so anyway, yeah, I mean, that was a big thing that helped me to kind of continue that movement of breaking out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating, man. For me, it's funny. In the book I wrote about, my experience, and for me, I had this driver, and the biggest driver was I had an incredible amount of stress in my life through work and trying to pay the bills, grad school, cancer. I got testicular cancer at the time. Maria was in grad school, 3 kids, a business.
Gosh.
That was losing incredible amounts of money. I was failing. The stress was so intense. I was working 14 to 20-hour days sometimes. And the stress was so intense on me that it just all kind of, I look back now and I go, first of all, A, I don't know how I survived. B, I'm really glad it happened because it pushed me to a breaking point that when I went out to White Raven, there's a place called, for the listeners, White Raven Center in Anchorage, Alaska. It's a healing center there. They do kind of shamanistic work, a therapy called rapid transformation therapy, where you're dealing with energies, but it definitely has a spiritual kind of a bent to it, and really emphasis on Native American spirituality, specifically focusing on some of the tribes, Southeast tribes in Alaska, and the real understanding of kind of energy in the body. A lot of Eckhart Tolle's teachings, that kind of thing. I ended up there, because I was, having suicidal thoughts. There was this voice in my head that was telling me to kill myself constantly. And so when I broke, I busted wide open, and I went into what you could call them, what we could describe as a mystic space for like 10 days, but it was one I couldn't turn off.
Wow.
I don't describe that in the book, but I couldn't, it slowly faded over 10 days
Yeah.
where I stopped seeing angels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I was seeing like all kinds of things, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to get way into that, but
Sure. But there had been so much tension built up for you.
Yeah. And so much trauma held in the body,
Mhm.
you know, from my dad's death when I was 12 to all these other crazy stuff, you know, so much intense trauma. And then the breaking was so massive. And the transformation so fast. It's like a couple of days later, I'm back at White Raven Center, and I'm talking to Floyd and Marianne, the proprietors there, and I'm like, you gotta tell me what's going on. You know, I'm like, I'm seeing all this crazy stuff, and they're like, oh, you know, it's okay, it's totally normal. You know, you're just seeing some of the spiritual side of the world here in the, you know, and that'll kind of slowly fade it back. You know, you just had a big shift, and I'm like, and I was like, because I was just at a church and there was like a creature sitting on the pastor's shoulder with a thing plugged into his neck, and he was like puppeting him, and he was like, yeah, and there, no reaction. You know,
They're just,
like,
yeah, that's normal, totally normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that kind of
been
stuff.
there.
That was an
Every
entity,
day.
and I'm like, is a demon? And he's like, well, demon's not really a great word to call, because demons, you know, makes it scary, and it's not really that scary. And I was like, it's not. He's like, no, they're all over the place, this kind of thing. And I was like, it was a lot to take in the first 3 days. You know,
Oh man, yeah, that was
because bro, like that first week was just like, I mean, like it was crazy. I'll tell you sometime, but we'll have a few more drinks.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, if you go from like the strict kind of modern materialistic type mindset of like, oh yeah, I know it's real, you know, like if I can touch it, if I can taste it, then it's real. If it's not, it's just not real. And then all of a sudden you're just like that level of engagement with the layers of reality that are above that.
It was massive. Yeah. It was massive.
Man,
so you ever read The Power of Now?
Oh, I feel like I have, but it's
Eckhart Tolle's book. His big book that kind of made Eckhart Tolle kind of a famous person.
Maybe I haven't.
He writes in the first chapter, he tells this brief story of how his thing, you know, being homeless and just not being homeless, this before he was homeless, is he was just, you know, massively depressed and just, you know, and then like he's just like sitting in his kitchen one night and just all of a sudden sees this light just going boom, boom. And this thing is like, I can't remember exactly how, but it was like a voice just said like, hold still. And all of a sudden he just go, poof. Then he went for like a month and a half, just wandering, sleeping on park benches in total bliss. Just, you know,
wow.
He talks about that experience. Right. And,
it's like
and
a
you
full
can go
on
back,
wake up call.
Yeah. Complete, what that book's, you know, Stealing Fire calls, you know, ecstasis, right? That's what happened to me for like 10 days. I was in like this ecstasis state, and it was, I look back on it now and it's really interesting because, you know, again, like everybody kind of has a thing where they go, oh, this is the thing you got to do. You got to do trauma work all the time. My brother's whole focus is trauma work all the time. And he really focuses on helping people kind of introduce that. Him and I have slightly different approaches to things. I'm more on the Ram Dass side, where Ram Dass is like, hey, there's a point you get to where the expanded consciousness kind of goes beyond and you see that trauma is an illusion as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Trauma, it's all illusion, all of it. But if you don't know that in your heart, if you don't come to realization of that, you can't force it.
Yeah.
And you can ask questions. So someone who's listening can go, well, is it not real? But if you're experiencing it internally in your body, you have to go there.
Yeah.
Right. You got to go there first. You got to be like, okay, you know, if you haven't gone there, you have to first, that's one of the stepping stones, you know, and you have to start working through some of that trauma. And so I look at the years and it takes time. This is another thing. Everybody wants to go so fast. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to go so fast.
That's my thing. Right.
Totally.
It's like, I'm always in that space where I'm like, oh, I'm going to go, you know, change the world and do this, that. And like, I've engaged already, even in some spaces where I'm like, whoa, okay, like, maybe I've stepped too far, but then it's like, no, okay, I'm fine here.
Right.
But it's this movement in and out, right? Where it's like,
right. And everybody's following kind of you've got to follow your own spirit. Like I was saying, like with my brother, you know what I mean? He's got to follow his path, right? And his path right now is dealing with trauma, and he helps other people do. So he's in that space still. And he's been in that space. I left that space a long time ago, and I'm in a different space. In my space, it's all somewhat illusion. I don't really, and I'll be honest with you, man, I don't walk around seeing much of what I see as anything real. Like, I live in Maui.
Yeah.
We have a sailboat. We see people snorkeling. I get to live in the most beautiful place in the world, doing the most beautiful thing you can do every day.
Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
when I'm not working on that, I'm on a golf course with a view of the ocean. What I mean? It's like, so I have this kind of incredibly, what you could say, materially beautiful life, but I don't see any of it as real. And when you stop experiencing material reality and everything, you hear that. I don't know if you can hear the goat screaming in the background. Yeah, there's a goat screaming. We live on a goat farm up here on the up country. Nice. Yeah. And they've been weaning these yearlings, and so they're just screaming for their moms the whole time. That's anyway. Awesome. So for the users going, are they torturing somebody in the background? No, that's a goat. That's a goat screaming for his mom. But what I'm saying is that when you stop experiencing material reality as reality, as absolute reality, it becomes kind of like a sandbox in which you can kind of play in, in which you start, because you don't get attached to stuff at all. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm a human, so I can look forward to things. I got a vacation. My wife and I, it's our 25th anniversary. We got a big 25th anniversary vacation. No kids. It's coming up. Yeah. End of August. I can't wait to go on this thing. But the weirdest thing for me is I've been on these vacations before, years ago, when I went in 2014. And man, my ego is, we gotta go. Just if I can just make it the next couple months, I'll be on that cruise ship. It'll be amazing. I don't experience that anymore. Yeah. Because the cruise ship's an illusion. I don't see it as real. I'm gonna have a great time. But the paradoxical nature of it is that, and none of it's real. Yeah. So then now we get into the question of consciousness, where we go, what is real then? Yeah. Because if anybody who's listening, and including you, Ken, if you're experiencing material reality, there's things you go, no, this is real. Okay, well, that's an interesting thing. Like, you should tap in and go, okay, I still think that this cup of coffee is a real cup of coffee. This is what I'm really doing. And I'm going, okay, well, subjectively speaking, if I handed that cup of coffee to someone who had no tongue, they would experience it in a very different way. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And right. If I handed it to someone who was blind or who had lost their sense of smell, they would be experiencing that coffee in a very, very different way. And it would not be real how you're describing it. Right. Yeah. So for me, it's like, I've found that I can live in this paradox in which I can just sit and just really enjoy that cup of coffee and go, isn't that magical? Like, look at this little illusion that just gets you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. One of the ways that I just had a conversation the other day with somebody, and I was trying to describe this, and what I did with it was to say, there's two ways that people have gone with this, to say that either there's idealism, in which everything is a product of my mind projecting the world, or there's empiricism, where everything is the world happening to me. Yeah. And you can transcend those and say, like, everything I ever experience is a function of what my interface, this body, is intaking. Yep. And thus everything actually happens internally, which means that maybe everything actually is a projection, right? And because I can actually impact the world, right? I can actually impact. So then maybe it all is ideal, but also it's the case that if I try to jump off a roof, I will hit the ground. Right. So there's it's neither all happening to you or you happening all to it. You just are. Yeah. Yeah. And and it's a really interesting thing to live, because, and this goes back to your Christian roots, in which you go, we were always taught that we had a spirit and a body. Right. One of the things I used to do when I first started in this space, and I was spending a lot of time teaching, where I would teach groups, I go to youth groups and college groups and stuff like that. And I would be teaching on the Holy Spirit, because my language at the time was really ideal for teaching about the Holy Spirit. Sure. And I would go, I remember talking to this group of college guys. It's like 45 college guys, and they were all up in Alaska on this kind of men's evangelical, we're going to go save all the Alaskans or something like that. Right. And so they were all up there for the summer. And my buddy who was running the group, he was like, hey, I got to go do this thing. Can you come talk to the group tonight at worship? Can you do a talk? I was like, yeah, sure. What do you want me to talk about? And he's like, well, just talk about, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, well, I can talk about the Holy Spirit. That's the only thing I can really talk about, because I don't want to talk about theology. And he was like, yeah, go. And I said, cool. So I get there, And I'm trying, and I start whiteboarding and stuff and everything. But I turned around and knowing that these are evangelical Christians, I said, okay, how many of you believe you have a body? And like, they're after they realize I'm serious, every hand slowly goes up, and I'm like, hey, okay, point to your body. And they're all like, and I said, okay, good. How many of you believe you have a spirit? And of course, these are all good Christian guys, so their hands immediately go up. I have a spirit. Okay, great. I said, point to your spirit. And then everybody's just sitting there kind of confused. And there's this guy in the front, and I said, what's your name? And he says, Mike. I said, Mike, stand up. Mike stands up. I said, where's your spirit, Mike? You said you had a spirit. Where is it? And he goes, and I go, in your chest? You're pointing at your chest. And he says, I don't know. Yeah. My chest. And I go, okay, good. I said, how many believe that your spirit is in your chest? and everybody's kind of looking confused. I go, guys, we say we have a spirit. Where is it? What is it made of? What does it do? And everybody's looking around. I go, the funny thing about this, I said, you guys would all, if I said, where's the Holy Spirit or how the Holy Spirit, you'd be like, oh, Holy Spirit, and you go right to the Bible and start talking about what you think the Bible says about the Holy Spirit. I said, you all said you believe you have a spirit, but you have no idea what it does, how to use it, where it's located, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And I was looking at the whole group's just kind of standing there stunned because they all realized that I was right, know? And I was like, how many of you would like to see your spirit? And I said, okay. I said, let's do this together. I said, everybody close your eyes. And they all close their eyes. I go, everybody, eyes closed. Even when you don't want to do this, just close your eyes anyway. And they're like, yeah, close your eyes. I said, great. And I took them on a little exercise. And I can't take credit for it because I was shown this by Floyd. Yeah. When I first asked him, I'm that first week, I'm on the couch. What the hell is happening? Kind of thing. Yeah. And he's like, you're a Christian, right? He did this with me. Yeah. So I took them through that same exercise, and I said, I had them start breathing, and I had them put their palms out. And I said, okay, everybody, we're going to breathe into the center of our palms. I said, when you can feel your palms, I want you just to kind of give a little nod. I said, I said, now your eyes are closed, but I want you to be able to feel it. And you should be able to see your palms with your eyes closed once you can feel them. And they're like, yeah, great. Okay, we're going to move that sensation out to your fingertips. And if anybody's listening right now and wants to do this, go for it. It's an awesome little thing. And so I go, now you should start to feel I said, breathe. I want you to breathe into your fingertips. And I said, and you should start to feel your fingertips tingling. And I'm like, give a little nod if you can feel your fingertips tingling. And like after a while, everybody's like, great, good. So what I did is over the course of like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I slowly moved that whole process, that mindfulness process, down the arm, elbows, shoulders, down to the feet, all the way up the knees, up through the torso, all the way through, up into the neck and into the head, and then right to the center. And then I said, okay. I said, everybody breathe, take a deep breath. I said, you should be able to see your entire body now. I said, with your eyes closed, you can see it. I said, give a little nod if you can see the whole thing. I said, great. And they're all just standing there. I was like, good. All right, good. Now, I said, in your imagination, with your mind's eye, I said, we're going to all take a step out of that space, out of that body. Okay, we're in one big step backwards. Is that on three? Ready? 1, 2, 3. And and you see all these guys going, like wobbling and a couple guys just going, whoa. I said, no. I said, and I'm like, look at it. What do you see? I said, don't say anything out loud. Just what do you see? Just observe it. I go, after a few minutes, I was like, just going to spend time with looking at it. I go, okay, now we're going to step back in. I had them take that step back in. And I said, open your eyes. And they all just, and every one of them's like, poof, like freaking Iron Man, I was like, and I was like, that was your spirit. And they're all just like, whoa, the place was just silent. And it was crazy because I was like, where did you think it was, guys? Like, what did we think it was? What that it wasn't something we could access? I said, why would we believe we have a thing? We were given a thing by God and then not use it.
Yes.
Own it. live in it, let it direct us. I said, when Paul's talking about walking in the Spirit, what do you think he's talking about? I go, that's it. I go, you just saw it. I go, that's the thing that's supposed to be running the show. I said, but if that's not running the show, because we didn't even know it was there, what was running the show? I go, what's the thing that's sitting there staring at 4 hours of porn every night? I go, what are we doing? I go,
yeah.
And everybody's just staring. And it was this is the coolest experience. I'll just finish up the story, but the coolest experience is that when I kind of wrapped it up, I sang, I said a blessing to the guys. I didn't really say a prayer or anything. I just said a little blessing. And then the worship team comes back up, of course, which is, men's college group is like a dude with a band, drummer, guitarist. Of course.
Nice.
Guitar guy. They come up and it's just quiet. And then the lead guitar guy's like, oh, don't really want to talk right now. We're just going to just play some worship. And he starts playing this beautiful worship song. And it's just beautiful, right? And then he's done and he kind of wraps up the service and it's done. Everybody stands up and gets going. This one kid comes direct, and I knew this kid was going to do. It was Mike, the guy in the front. He comes straight up to me and he goes, do you believe that Jesus is like the Son of God? And he starts going through the theology thing, because the thing inside of him, the attachment, is freaking out. Mm-hmm. Can't be present. Has to check this whole thing with the theology thing. And I said, hey, why don't you just stop for a second? Just sit down. I said, just rest for a minute, I said, because I have no idea. And he was just looking at me, just and I go, just sit quietly. And then another guy, and then another guy. And pretty soon I got all 45 guys. No joke. And they're all crowded around me. Yeah. And they're all asking questions like gunshot stuff. And I said, finally, hey, everybody, just sit down. This is over on the side. And they all sat on the floor. All of a sudden I got this huge group sitting on the floor. And they're just asking questions. And I'm just going, yeah, I don't know that one. That one, no, I don't know about that. That confuses me too, kind of thing. But after a while I was going, guys, I really do think the job is that thing that we just talked about is just to become very conscious and aware of it and just try and walk with that in charge. So with your Spirit in charge, I go, and then just follow it wherever it takes you. I said, trust it, follow it, trust it. I said, we've been kind of taught, I think, to not trust, because we're looking for this thing called the Holy Spirit, but we never learn that the Spirit, our spirit, is the thing that communicates with the Holy Spirit. I said, we've been skipping. Our egos have been trying to talk to the Holy Spirit. I said, if our ego is trying to talk to the Holy Spirit, it just becomes a mind game, which is what the evangelical church is. It's complete. It's a complete mind structure. All it is a curriculum and a lot of people who need a lot of money and a lot of fear and that's it. That's all it is. Yeah. Like, I swear to God, that's what it's become completely, which is why it explains why 80% of people voted for Donald Trump. And my mom is calling Donald Trump a godly man, right? There's no Spirit-led thing happening right there. Yeah. And not to get into politics, because I'm not talking about Biden. They're all
totally. Yeah.
What I'm saying is like, that's kind of where it's at, right? We haven't been saying, I'm going to let the Spirit lead me, because the Spirit leads us through to wisdom and joy and peace and love and kindness and self-control, which we just
that it says it will.
Yeah, all the things. Yeah, those are all byproducts of walking in the Spirit, right? Yeah. And so this was the kind of Christian way of understanding it. It's crazy to see kind of some of those guys from that one talk. I get emails here and there once in a while. Oh, dude, that talk was just crazy. Actually, it's funny. I'll say this, this is like 10 years later. I kid you not. 10 years later, I'm driving in my neighborhood trying to find one of my kids. There's all these kids in that neighborhood. I'm like, where is the kid? I don't know whose house he's at. You know what I mean? Trying to find one of my kids. And I pulled over and there's these two guys standing on the road. And I said to one of the guys, hey, I'm looking for this little redhead kid. He's like 8. And they're like, and the guy goes, dude. I was like, yes. And he goes, yeah. You're the dude. You're the dude who gave that talk. And I was like, are you one of the guys who was at the talk? And he's like, yes. And he had moved to Alaska because of the talk. He'd moved to Alaska and he lived there. And he goes, you're the guy. You're the guy. And he's like, and he tells his friend, he goes, this is the guy. And I was going, dude, I'm so glad that was helpful. And I asked him, well, how did it go for you? And he said, yeah, it changed his whole life, right? In terms of what all he did was he started going, oh, I'm going to follow that. Yeah. Right.
Well, there's that. Yo, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to comment on that fact, right? Like, we're so obsessed with this level of processing that is the thinking mind.
Oh God.
That is the binary ones and zeros of what I can put into language, what I can reason out, all these kinds of things. We're so stuck there that even a move that is, I mean, now that's a powerful exercise. That's a powerful exercise to do that in a group of people that's that large that will actually engage. But like, that's not a crazy sophisticated exercise. But even that,
super simple. You can do it right now.
yeah.
Right?
But even that is enough to just become the most real experience that anyone's ever had.
Yeah. I mean, with that group, it's funny because right before that, I'd been doing this kind of thing where I was talking about the Trinity and what some of the concepts were there. And I'd even said the word God, and I was like doing, so at the top, there's God right here. And I said, oh, guys, by the way, do you guys know where the word God came from? And they were like, and I go, it's actually Hindu by way of Germanic. And they were like, this is kind of a long story, but it's a Hindu word. And it kind of evolved through the Germanic and moved kind of east. And they're all just going, like that was enough to throw them all off right there. They were going, well, what's happening to me? Kind of because we're so identified with the words that we use, right? We're so identified with even the word Jesus. You hear someone call him Yeshua, and people go, oh, dude, it's Jesus. Okay. And I'll go, really? like that's, his name was Joshua. And that's a more accurate translation of Yeshua. It was Joshua. And it was a very Jewish name. Right. Anyway. And
that's always the thing. That's always the thing with the thinking processor is it's the words that catch you.
The words. Yeah. The words. And look, all of that to say, it's all okay. That's how we do it. You know what I mean? It's we all move in that space, I want to go back to the very beginning of our conversation, because I do have to kind of go here pretty quick, but I got a steak to grill. And when I do steak, it's the filet. I've got to make the steak. I've got to cut the steaks, and then I've got to do I got to go and get the fresh herbs out of the garden. I got to I do the Tuscan preparation, right? It's rosemary out of the garden and basil and oregano. I do rosemary, oregano, olive oil. It's amazing, but it takes some time.
So what do you do with it? Hold on, let's walk.
Well, going back to the beginning in which we were talking about this kind of idea of identification and how we immediately kind of identify. I'm convinced that the thinking mind is actually the primitive side of our brain and does not really have a place. It doesn't really have a place in running our lives. I really don't think that. And I know that's really hard for a lot of people because they really believe that they're smart. It's like my son, my 23-year-old son that I was mentioning in the beginning, who's like, I believe I'm smart. I'm figuring out that I'm pretty smart and I have good instincts about things, some of that. I think we're all that way. I think we really do, especially dudes, we all think that we're really, really smart.
Yeah.
I am convinced now that I really am that it actually is a very lame operating system, and that we need to, that if you want to learn, some of these new agey concepts like manifestation, or if you want to learn how do you have the life that you want? How do you find peace, joy, love, all this stuff, walk in the spirit? You have to start by identifying where your thinking mind, where your analytical mind is dominating. And you have to start with a practice that helps shut that down. I have a couple practices that shut that process down, and when I recognize that it's doing it, I just go to my practice, right? So I do yoga. I have a meditation practice. Sometimes just exercise is enough for me to do it. I'll go for a long walk, like a vigorous walk where I'm sweating like crazy. And that does the trick, but it's a thing that shuts that process down, brings me to this present space. And then my spirit can step in and I can just start to trust my intuition. I just trust it. Trust it. And over time, you start to trust it more and trust it more and trust it more. You start to see the difference between when your ego is telling you to do something and when your spirit's telling you to do something. You really do. You make mistakes early on. You do. Yeah. Your ego is the one that's like when you have a big spiritual revelation, your ego is like, oh, tell everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, you should tell your wife that she should meditate every day. That's the ego, right? That's the thinking mind going, this is freaking awesome. Like, hey, babe, I'm telling you, you need to do this, Check on your spirit. Your spirit be like, let's just let her figure that out by maybe watching your example as you become more and more peaceful and that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole thing's fascinating. Fascinating to talk about this for.
And it's that movement, right? Like I would just piggyback off that it's the movement of wholly extracting the identity.
Yeah.
Right. It's that extracting of the realization that like you are not whatever thing. Like so there's, I think it's the third commandment, that thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual name of God that he gives himself is I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working with this for a while now, where I do my best to avoid saying I am anything.
Interesting.
And because I think it's actually the speaking, like words are spells. I fully believe that like the words you speak do structure the reality in which you live. Thereby they create the world.
They do. They create the world. Yeah.
And if you never say I am X, right? If you never claim an identity, and you never get stuck.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple of books that actually, going back to the beginning of my journey, that were really other stepping stones that I want to point out. There was one that was written. It was called Flickering Pixels. It's by a pastor. Oh, what the heck was his name? Shane Hips. That's what it was. His name was Shane Hips. You can still find that book on Amazon. If you're a Christian and you're kind of going through this, it was a fascinating book because it was about that. It was about kind of, I mean, I remember one of the things that blew my mind about that book. He was talking about how the development of the Chinese kind of alphabet and the kind of what you call the Western alphabet, the Western and Eastern ways of thought, and how the languages and then the alphabets having a calligraphic symbolic alphabet versus a phonetic alphabet, and how it ended up shaping philosophy and shaping the whole way of everything. He was even showing like, here's a church. Here's a Christian church before the 1400s, when the Bible was first put on the printing press. And the Gutenberg Bible, right, was printed here, and it's this, and it was a massive cathedral with no seats in it or anything like that. People would just come in and stand, right? Here's the church after the Gutenberg Bible, and it's all these seats in rows and this structure, and he's showing it next to a page of the Gutenberg Bible that has these perfect columns. That the actual visual structure created in the Gutenberg Bible was influencing the visual application in church itself, the organizing of the people that were there to see it. Blew my mind. I remember just going, oh my gosh, because it was exactly what you're just talking about. It just totally pulled the whole thing open and went, oh, I don't know anything, you know?
Yeah.
If I haven't studied this and really understood how this all came together, then I don't know anything.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a really, really helpful book for me at that time. There was another one. There's an Irish philosopher named Peter Rollins, and his stuff was always all of his stuff blew my mind. But the first one I read was How Not to Speak of God. The concept being from the Jewish religion, right? We don't write the name, right, of God, right, Yahweh.
Yeah.
And then and also in Islam, right? We don't have pictures. We don't show pictures and visual pictures of Allah, right?
Yeah.
This is heretical to do that. And he was extrapolating kind of all the philosophical thought around those concepts of how when we name something, we make it less sacred, right? How we strip it of its sacred nature. And I was going back even into indigenous concepts and stuff like that, Celtic concepts.
Sure.
I remember kind of just being blown away by that whole idea. And I still see it now. And the way that we name there was a book series that came out called The Secret.
Okay.
And there was it was big. You go into like a FedEx, like a Kinko's, and would always be one of the motivational things was called The Secret. And it supposedly kind of extrapolated how the mysteries of the universe and how to manifest your dreams and stuff like that. Very Tony Robbins kind of without the Tony Robbins, right?
Sure.
And without the giant teeth and the and then there was a documentary of it that came out. I think it was on Netflix. I think it might still be on Netflix, called The Secret.
Okay.
And it was basically like all of these kind of hyper motivated new agey, dudes of, people that are spiritual teachers or whatever, life coaches, that kind of thing. And they're all basically explaining how this all works. And the producer, lots of kind of slick edits and stuff like that. Basically, it's something that could have been explained in 5 minutes. Instead, it's like a 90-minute documentary about how manifestation works.
Sure.
And And what I remember reading it and going, man, this is, and all the people that were going, oh yeah, have you read The Secret? Have you seen The Secret? And my brother at the time was also like, have you seen this? You know, and we were talking about it a lot. What it was this kind of, it was a hokey kind of way of like, name it and claim it. Right. Churches used to do that thing all the time. Name it and claim it. Name it in the name of God. You know, I want $1 million and claim that. And claim that in the name of Jesus. It's just, it was that thing. It was exactly that. Right.
Yep.
I've come to believe now that like, more what he said in Flickering Pixels, and what he said is that you have this thing that you want. He would imagine, he'd do this with stress. This was his meditation with stress. I do this now in terms of how I deal with manifestation. I have a thing I want. I put it in a balloon and I blow it up. I let it go. I just give it to the universe. I just give it to God. And I go, that's the last I'll think about that right now. I'm not going to spend any more time unless you bring that back to me, unless my intuition says, hey, remember this. I don't think about it. When I can tell when my ego is going, oh man, that vacation's coming up.
Yeah.
The ego jumps in, I just go, nope. Not today. Not today, Satan, kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's like, I just go, no, I'm not going to spend any time there. I'm here. And that's when I come out to my practice. Just be here. I'm here. I'm not going to go there. The universe knows what I want. God knows what I want. And since I learned that practice, honestly, since I learned that, I kind of borrowed that from Shane Hibbs. Pretty much every single thing that I've ever wanted has happened. And I'm not joking.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. Like everything. And I could go into that for days, but I just sit there and watch, and it just makes me laugh now. Every time like somebody calls me out of nowhere, or I get some email, or I get something comes in the mail, or I meet some person that I'm like, yep, I've been asking that for like, it's a crazy experience. Yeah. It's a crazy experience.
Yeah. I mean, there's something beautiful about like allowing things to be what they are and not trying to force them to be something you think they should be.
I would say, I would add to that something essential about that. That is an essential process. If a person wants to find peace, you have to learn how to let go. And it's not about like abandoning your dreams. That's not it at all. I think the balloon thing is a really helpful visual. Put it in a balloon. Just let the universe have it. Send it out. It's a message in a bottle. Put it in the ocean. Throw it in the ocean. Let it go. Yeah. Let the ocean take it. I can't remember where I heard that metaphor. I think that was a David Wilcox metaphor. But just let the ocean take it. Let it take it where it wants to go, and just trust that, and be here. Stay here on the shore. Put your 2 feet on the ground. Stand tall. Be here. It'll come around when it's time. Floyd used to always say, he said this to Seth, he said this to me, money will come when you're ready. Money will come when you're ready. Kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it did. And it has. And it continues to.
Yeah.
When,
I think one of the, and we'll wrap this up here, but one of the things that when I first met you in person was
in Maui, Hawaii.
In Maui, kind of at the height of COVID.
Yeah.
And we had coffee, and you mentioned how fairly devastating COVID had been for your business.
Yeah.
And we talked about it some, and your comment was, yeah, it's fine. It's whatever. Money comes and goes. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, okay, so this guy has, a really, a great life, a great business. Sorry, this cat is.
Dude, cats are great. I have 2.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Awesome. I got a dog in the background. I don't know if you can see my dog sleeping here in the background too.
Yeah, that's awesome. But like, here you are with this whole thing, this kind of wonderful lifestyle, and it's kind of teetering on the brink, following something you can't control, and totally just not stressed about it.
Yeah.
And that really spoke to me, right? Like that was one of the moments where I was like, I mean, I had a lot of respect for you already, and you'd been very helpful in my journey already. But that was kind of the moment that I was like, okay, this guy, like, he's not just trying to put this on, right?
No. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny. It's funny. We all know this, right? That stress doesn't actually solve any problems. Stress is an imagined thing. It just is. And no, I don't care. Anybody who tells me that they're under a lot of stress, I go, well, that's in your head. And I know that sounds callous when I say that, but it really is.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Because if you take a crazy person and you go, and they're just like walking around in bliss, and you go, oh, Eckhart Tolle walking around homeless for a month and a half. Like, you should be super stressed out. No, I'm just happy. I'm in bliss. It's just how we see things. My wife sees it the exact same way. It's like, well, what would that do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when we have something that goes down that's really crazy, if you have a business thing that happens or something like that. And if any of you guys run a small business, there's, shit happens. And then when it happens, we'll give ourselves about 5 minutes to be stressed about it. And then we're like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next right thing to do?
Yeah.
Meditate, go ground yourself, meditate, breathe, be here. What should we do? Okay. My wife, I want to say this. We were closed for 9 months. She had 37 employees when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
You know what her first decision was when the pandemic hit? I'm not going to take any of my employees off of healthcare during a pandemic. Nice. Right?
Wow. That's
unless you're going to have zero income. But she was like, no, we're going to. And she did. She kept every single one of her employees on that healthcare for the entire 9 months.
Wow. That's amazing.
And and it cost us everything. But man, it was amazing. That was her first decision. She was like, well, of course, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We watched all the other companies, the boat companies, just firing people left and right, taking everything away from panicking and freaking out.
Yeah.
But she was like, no, why would I do that to me? And I look back and I go, man, she did it calmly. And it wasn't because we had a bunch of savings and we could just sit back on that. It's because she was like, she follows her spirit, and that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I watch our company, and I watch her just being blessed over, and I watch all of that just coming back to her tenfold over and over again. And I'm not surprised by any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's like all the places where, Jesus says basically that's how it works.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's true. Like, if you read the teachings.
Yeah.
You read them.
Like if you take it seriously, it's true.
If you take it seriously. Yeah. You start to go, oh. In fact, what if that's the only thing we're supposed to do? What if our job is not to kind of go pursue the next big thing, to pursue the money? That's the thing that I think, if I was going to leave that with your listeners, I would say, stop pursuing money.
Yeah.
Stop it. Stop acting like money is the thing. Pursue spirit. Pursue a line of a path in which your intuition and your spirit is leading, and your ego, and make that your mission. Your mission is to just move the analytical mind, thinking mind to the background, put it in the back seat of the car, not in the trunk, just put it in the back seat. It doesn't get to drive anymore. It's like I don't let my kids drive. I don't let my 12-year-old drive the car. I let him sit in the car, but he doesn't get to drive. I drive the car because I know what I'm doing. Let your spirit drive from here on out. And if that's the only job, if the only job now is to make sure that your spirit's in the driver's seat every day, then you start to see where daily practice is super helpful. Do you have a practice that helps you put your spirit in the driver's seat? And once it could be 5 minutes of meditation, and you're like, oh, it's there.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
And there's days where you go, I need like 2 hours of massage or something.
Yeah, exactly. And some days it'll take me half the day and multiple kind of trying to return. And some days I don't get back there hardly all day. Yeah. But then I'll have a week where I'm just
you're in the zone. Flow. And it's amazing when your spirit jumps back in. Your spirit doesn't spend any time beating you up over anything. It's not like you're once you're back in that space, you're curious, like, can we talk about that shit? Like you just spent a day with your ego. What was that all about? It doesn't do that. It just
the ego does.
But the ego does.
The ego. You always know you're in ego space when it's like, hey man, you've really been doing poorly here.
Yeah, you said when you binged, freaking Bridgerton today, instead of going to work. You're it's amazing how that works. And I've gone through that now. It's been enough time. Like I said, all this takes more time than we want it to, but it's been enough time for me now that I trust that process so well. I don't beat myself up. Even when my ego is like doing its thing, I just go, yeah, okay, I'll figure it out. Yeah, it'll be fine. I'm patient with myself now that way, and I'm forgiving of myself. And it just becomes this kind of lovely little dance that I have to do with my own ego. It's awesome. It's awesome, man.
Well, with that, I'll let you go make your steak.